Today in the lab we're going to be doing final assembly on the Revision 6 Amiga 500, starting with the floppy drive. So on my Rev6 Amiga that I'm putting in this new case, the floppy drive button that came with this case does not fit onto the floppy drive that I had. Right, this is an Epson SMD 300, and this button needs to fit on a Chinon drive. Now, in the Rev6, I have a Chinon drive, but it's not the same Chinon drive, and so the button doesn't seem to fit. So I purchased the exact model Chinon that I need, an FB354. And this was listed as not working on eBay. You see the button that it has, which is somewhat damaged, is very similar to the button I received. And I guess the only difference is this part down here is broken off on this one, which is part of the damage. So I've got my Rev5 here on the bench, and I'm going to test this drive with the Rev5. Just because I happen to have it on the bench makes sense. Now the other thing that's going to be critical is that I have a hard drive set up, so I can boot from the hard drive and have this be DF0 and test it. So let's do that right now. Alright, so I've got the drive connected and just sitting on top of the other one. That should be good enough. I've had good luck recently buying eBay drives that are dead, and come to find out they just need a head cleaning, so we'll see. Alright, so I don't know if you can see this, but the drive light is on, so that means there's something the matter here. It's not even spinning. So let's turn this off and see. Maybe I have the cable backwards. Alright, so that was in fact the issue. These two different Chinons have different orientations for their cable. I believe the one in here is a FB345E, and this is without the E. Either that or it's a 345A, I'll have to check. But I hear it syncing, so that's good news. Alright, so I've booted from the hard drive, and I've got Amiga Test Kit 1.1 in the second drive. So I can load that up here and run some tests against the first drive. So I've got my handy dandy cleaning disc here, focus please. And I put some alcohol in it. We're going to clean this drive before we do anything else. And I'm going to go to floppy drives. It's already set to DF1. And we'll do a read test. And now that read test should fail, right? Because it's a cleaning disk. But we'll let this run for a little bit. Not a full run, that's excessive. But maybe just a line of these, one cylinder, and or I guess a line is 10 cylinders, and then we'll try a real disc. This is the second time I've run this through, but it seems to work fine. So this is another successful thing. I did not run one of these tests before I did the cleaning disc, just because God knows what's on those heads, so I'd much rather clean them using the cleaning disc with isopropyl alcohol before I run any of my real discs through it. So maybe before it was giving read errors, I don't know, I didn't test that, but now we can see it's running and seeking, and if we look back here, it's getting close to all green across the board. There we go, all green. So that's a success. Now as I'm going through this drive sounds a little rough. So I may need to open it up and give it some lubrication, which I haven't done before, but I'll make a video on that surely. Probably need to do that with all of my drives, honestly. So alright, so I've tested this drive out. Looks like it's good, but now I need to put the button in. And seems like in order to put the button in, I need to take the exterior case off. And I believe that's just 3 screws. One here on the bottom, one on each side. Alright, so now I have the case off, and once you remove those screws, this should just slide back. Now, I also had to remove one of the grounding screws on the side. It wasn't connected to the mechanism at all, but it would have caused trouble getting the case off of it. So now that we have this out, let's put this little doodad in here. So if we look at this here, we should be able to put the bottom part in here and then thread this top part to connect up here. Alright, it took a bit of doing, but this is now in here, and if we look under at the underside here, you can see maybe a little hard to see, but there's a little button on that leg that comes out, and it should be, you know, mating with this hole here. So that's in there pretty sturdy. That ain't going nowhere. So I think we're good here. This is now looking better. So I'm gonna put this back together, and we'll test it out again, and hopefully it still works. Alright, so there we have it. New button with the feet on here. So we'll give this a test in the proper Amiga 500. Now, I decided not to, you know, open this up and lubricate it and all that just yet. Because I think I'm going to do all my floppy drives in a batch sometime in the future. So now that we have our floppy drive button installed, we can install this in the new case. Now, one difference between the old case and this new case is that up here in the corner, there's no support for the floppy drive. So if I put this in here, there's nothing holding it up on this side. Now, compare this to the old case, right? And here's a support post right here. Now, this product doesn't come with any instructions, so, you know, it doesn't tell me what to do here. But I don't like the fact that there's just kind of nothing there supporting this. Maybe I'm being kind of anal retentive, I don't know. So what I've found is that using a standoff and a nut here, I can create a support post that seems to work okay. And this is what it looks like installed on the drive next to the regular standoffs here. And now if I screw the bottom screw in here, I can place the drive on here and have that screw come up and connect with the standoff here and make a real tight connection. So I've got all three screws in here now. This one sticks out more than the other two. In the old case it was in a recessed hole, but here it's flush against the top. I may see if I can find a flat screw instead of a round top to put in there, with the other two just go in there. Not a problem right now. Alright, so my next problem here is the cable that I had with my floppy drive. So this cable came with the Rev6 and was used with the Epson drive that came with it. And you'll notice that the one of the pins on this cable is blocked. Now this is a pretty common thing to do. This pin is generally not used in floppy drives. And so if you put a block here, you can create a keyed connector so that you can't put it in the wrong way. Now, putting it in the wrong way isn't disastrous generally. It just means that the drive won't work. However, this Chinon drive that I have does not have that pin cut out, so I can't use this cable with this drive without going in and cutting a pin. Now, I could do that, but I don't want to. So I pulled this cable from an Amiga 1200 that I'm also working on to use temporarily. And it's a little bit shorter. The 1200 had a shorter cable length, and you can see that here. but it will work good enough for the meantime. We've got a new one of these on order, but it's taken a while to get here. That may be one thing to look out for if you have one of these with an Epson drive and you're looking to do the full thing with the floppy drive. You might want to check your floppy cable to make sure that it doesn't have any blocked pins, or that, you know, the pins match at least. So that's a bit tighter with the shorter Amiga 1200 cable, but it works okay. It works well enough to boot Amiga OS 1.3. Next we have the ground screw connected here for the keyboard, and then we connect up the keyboard. Now be careful, because this connector is directional. It matters which direction you plug it in. But on both my Rev5 and my Rev6, there's a blank pin here in the middle, so you can tell which way to put it in. So we're starting to look pretty close here, and we're booting up Amiga OS 1.3 again. We'll do some keyboard tests and things of that nature before I really put it all back together and seal it up. And we have it all back together now. So just like on the original case, there's 6 screws in total, 3 on each side of the case. And they're all the same size, so no worries about different sizes. The only one that I found was kind of problematic was this one here on the corner, because you have to use a skinny screwdriver in here to actually get it in. Otherwise, it's just like the original case. Now the last thing to do is to put on the badge here. And there we go. That is the Amiga 500 Revision 6 in its new case. Looking pretty snappy with new keycaps and the special edition Scourge of the Underkind badge. Hopefully I like this game and not just like the way the case looks. But I think this looks really snappy. You know, very reminiscent of the CD32 color palette. And with the new case and the new keycaps, this should be looking really good for quite some years to come. So now that I got my case all built out, I need to have a matching mouse. Now there were a lot of different tank mice over the years, lots of very subtle variations, and this reproduction case I think reproduces the latest form of the tank mouse, which I have one of those right here, and you can see there are 2 pads here of different shapes. One's a rectangle, one's kind of a, I don't know, like a curve shape. And the connector on this one is a big long one with no thumb screws. So if you have one of these that looks like this, the idea is just to transfer the guts from this one into the new shell. Now there were other variations of a tank mouse, and most of them were older, and they had undersides that looked like this. So they have 4 round dots for their skids, and the door for the ball is different. And usually those may come with different kinds of connectors. So this one is for an Amiga 1000, and it's designed to fit with the Amiga 1000's body. Then I have this one, which I think came with the Revision 5 Amiga 500 that I have. I'm actually not sure. They were jumbled up a little bit. But this one's similar, just says Amiga here underneath. And it has a little stubby connector here. Now there's some misinformation out on the internet that says if you have one of these mice, one of these tank mice, with a stubby plug like this, that it's not an Amiga mouse, but an earlier mouse for Commodore 64 or 128. Well, this right here proves that incorrect. I have no reason to believe this isn't original. But you can see why that is. This is not an Amiga mouse, but it is a tank mouse, and we can see here on the edge this is a model 1351, which was for a Commodore 64 or a 128. And these always, to my knowledge, have the little stubby connector here. Anyhow, back to this guy right here. So I could take the guts out of one of these tank mice, but then my cable would be the wrong color. And I happen to have something here that I think might be interesting. This is a laser mouse insert for a tank mouse. And I bought this several years ago and never used it. I actually think there's another revision of it out now, or maybe there's no revisions of it out at all. But I think what I'm going to try and do is open up this tank mouse, which is the design that this is based off of, and then also open up one of these other tank mouse that I have, just to see if the guts are the same inside. So if you had an Amiga 1000, or, well, this is a Commodore 1351, but if you had, say, an Amiga 1000 style or one of those snubby end connectored Amiga mice, if they would work in this or if you need the later design. So let's do that first and see. So to open all tank mice, they're pretty simple. There's two screws here at the top. And then once you get both of these out, you can kind of take it out like that. There are little hinges here that connect the bottom side of the mouse together. So when opening it, you kind of open it up like that. So that's one of these older tank mice, and I can tell pretty much immediately that these may not be compatible. At least not compatible without significant modification. So one big difference is, see how the buttons are. So the buttons on this guy have very long protrusions underneath them. This one has very short protrusions. And that's because the buttons here on this mouse are raised up. So I don't think the guts from these earlier mice, if they have these for skids, will work with this new case without significant modification to the case. So let's compare this older version of tank mouse that's incompatible to the newer version, what I think is the final version. And this is again distinguished by the different skids. And we can tell immediately that these are very different boards on the inside, and that the buttons are in a lower position, and the case has a very similar design to the new case. Right? They're long protrusions coming out of the buttons. So this should work all right with the new case and this latest version of the Amiga Tank mouse. I should be able to do this case swap successfully should I choose. So I have the Amiga Laser Tank mouse board mounted here in the new case. The spacers came with the kit, and then the screws came with the kit from A1200.net. Now to test this out initially, I'm going to be using the cord from the old tank mouse, and in order to use that, I have to cut a ground wire that's soldered to the old tank mouse's board. Now that ground wire is not used here, so it doesn't really matter that I have to cut it. This seems to work pretty good. I have it hooked up here to my 2000, and you can see mouse moving around. And the board here, after the spacers and these screws were installed, is pretty firmly intact, and the The connector from the old cable just fits right in. The only difference is this ground wire that I had to cut from the old housing isn't needed on the new board. So if I were gonna use this cable in final installation, I'd have to wrap this connector here with something so that it doesn't short anything out. Now the other thing is I didn't use the bottom plate that came with the A1200 kit because there was a special bottom plate that came with the LCD or the laser mouse kit here. Now oddly enough, that color on that almost matches the color of this case, so that's good. I've heard others cutting a little bit of the lens assembly here so that it can fit in with the original mouse cover. I might do that later, but really I'm not super worried about that. It is the bottom of the mouse after all, not something you normally look at. However, I don't really want to use this cable. I want to have something that's more in line with the color of this. So I purchased a new DB9 cable here, and these are pretty common. They're sold as replacement cables for Atari-style joysticks, and you really just need to make sure you have one with 9 connectors on the end of it, because while you don't need the ground pin for this one, so you only are using 8 of them. I don't know that in the fewer pin varieties of these cables that you would get all the right pins connected. So I went ahead and made myself a little connector here with the JST connector. And if I were smart, I would have taken and done this a little better, maybe with some shrink wrap. But I don't have the right size shrink wrap, and I want to kind of get this back together. I may come back and redo this to make it prettier. This better matches the color scheme I'm going for here. Now the only problem is, if we take a look at the original cable, there's this grommet here that's pretty emblematic of the look of the tank mouse, and I thought this might be removable, but no, this one's actually fused into the cable itself. And I wasn't able to find any replacements for this, so this new mouse will have to go grommetless, at least for a while. And that's a little problematic because this provides strain relief and protects the cable. So I have to be a little careful with this mouse until I figure out a solution for this missing piece. In order to get this wired up correctly, it actually took me 2 tries because the colors for these cables, unlike, say, Ethernet, aren't standardized, and so I had to reverse engineer them. And like I say, that took 2 tries to get right. Fortunately, I didn't fry the board or my Amiga while I was doing that. So I have this now with the new cable hooked up to my Amiga 4000T on the bench. And if we go over here, we can see that the mouse does move and works alright. So I've decided to route the cable out like this, and then have a little piece of masking tape here to hold it in place. Not sure if this is a good idea or not, but I figure it will at least provide some level of strain relief. Now, importantly, the cable is not touching the sensor part right here, so I think this will be okay. So here this is all back together, and I was a little bit worried at first because I was having some alignment issues with the buttons, but once I got the 2 screws in here, focus please, it all came together fine. Now, unfortunately, the kit from A1200.net does not include new exterior screws. This makes sense because most of the time you're not constructing a new tank mouse, you're swapping out the guts of an old one. So I may have to find replacements so that I can put back together my old tank mouse that I borrowed some pieces from here. But I've got so many tank mice that it doesn't really matter. And so last thing to do is to put on the skids that were provided. I'm going to do that off camera because it's a little awkward, my setup here. And there we go with the new black skids. Looking pretty sharp. And here we have the Amiga 500 Revision 6 all back together in its new case with new keycaps and a new mouse. And I must say I'm really pleased with how this turned out. Going into this I was a little bit skeptical about having a new case, how much of a difference that would actually make, but this really does look great. And I'm especially pleased here with the new tank mouse. Even though I couldn't find a grommet for the end of this, it really does look nice and feels just like a new tank mouse, which should be expected. It's the same molds, but still, when I got it I was skeptical. And I'm really pleased with the new keys. I think they look great and they feel great. And I do really like this color scheme. It's very reminiscent of a CD32. Now I have the monitor off just so that you can really see the machine itself and not have the light from the monitor drown it out. But if I turn the monitor on, we can see this is running Workbench 1.3 and everything seems to work. Sound, music, disk drive, it's all good. Now, unfortunately, I still can't play this Scourge of the Underkind game on this Amiga yet because it only has 512K RAM stock. So I'm going to have to do some upgrades for some accessories to get it there. However, that'll be the subject of some future episode. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this rebuild. I certainly enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.